Good afternoon, Australia, und guten Morgen, Deutschland. Welcome to the German-Australian Growth Summit, our virtual part 1. I'm Christoph von Spessart, the Executive Director of the German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Please let me acknowledge the traditional owners. I would like to acknowledge the Gadigal of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of this place we now call Sydney. I want to pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here with us online today. Today, we would like to hear and talk about growth. Please let me start by telling you a little story. My grandfather was a farmer. Every summer, I was allowed to join him for the wheat harvest. While we sat together on the combine, he once told me how wheat actually grows. After germination, the plant soon grows quickly upwards. However, the stem repeatedly forms dense nodes. During this time, growth appears to be very slow on the outside. Inside, however, a lot is happening in preparation for the next phase of growth. And then, suddenly, growth continues rapidly. And when there are storms and the stalk bends, it always straightens up again at the last knot and doesn't get destroyed at all. And just as the wheat sometimes bends and then rises again with the help of those dense knots, we can also do that. This is how many of us in the German-Australian business community use the challenging pandemic to create those nodes and be dense and to focus. So did we as the Chamber. So now let us all restart our growth rapidly as businesses, as society, and as individuals. We have a packed program for you today that consists of 4 great topical panels that are based on the 4 largest growth sectors in the German-Australian business relationship. This year, we focused and established 4 clusters with dedicated cluster managers in the Chamber, and you will not be surprised that our clusters are exactly those 4 major growth sectors: energy, health, mining and resources, and food and beverage. We are delighted to have our outstanding cluster managers as the moderators of the panels today. Following the 4 panels, we have a very special announcement in regards to the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance. As many of you know, hydrogen is a topic of particularly strong growth opportunity, and the collaboration will be further strengthened with today's announcement. As if this would not already be enough, we will, as a final highlight, hear the first speech by our new Chamber President towards the end of the program. And I could not be happier about the inspirational female leader that has accepted our invitation to become our new president. I also would like to acknowledge our event partners that have made today's event possible, leading German-Australian businesses that are ready to support your business growth as well. First and foremost, I would like to thank SAP as our summit sponsor. Our long-standing close collaboration with SAP is continuing at today's event, and SAP is a leader in providing solutions for all 4 industries you will hear about today. In addition to SAP, let me thank our panel sponsors, Merck, Weidmuller, Ecograph, and Woodside, as well as B. Braun and Logwin. In addition, it is my pleasure to announce that Germany Trade and Invest will join us as event partner for the Physical Growth Summit on 24th of March next year. Thank you to all our event partners. I would also like to quickly mention that we are utilizing Remo as a platform today. You are now all installed on it. Thanks for joining us. The main reason for this platform is that there are excellent networking opportunities. I highly encourage you to use them with the virtual tables during the break between the panels and following the Growth Summit program. There are actually 2 different floors where you can move up between floor 1, 2, or 3. Can I now please hand over to you, dear Karen Swissler, from our summit sponsor SAP, to say a few words and to introduce our patron, the German ambassador, Dr. Thomas Fitsch. Dear Karen, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Christoph. Good afternoon, all of the Australians. Some in lockdown. I just learned from Andrew Spinks. He's the one in Western Australia who's free. Welcome to everybody here. For everybody who's joining us from Germany or overseas today. As we are all knowing, it was really nice to actually plan this event together with Christoph and the team, that we will be together today in person. Unfortunately, we are bound to this roller coaster of a pandemic, but however, it looks like at least some of the states in Australia are coming out of this in the next couple of weeks. Nevertheless, I'm just got some teaching around the Remo platform, so we are all very excited to gather here today virtually. I'm pleased that Christoph, you and the team with everybody working around the clock have been able to set up this great afternoon discussing themes which are very close, I think, to everybody's hearts and minds currently. And the themes around health, sustainable life and livelihoods, of course, climate change and renewable energies, as well as digitization and intelligent enterprises are something which we are very much enjoying, looking forward to hear from our panel experts and the moderators of the cluster from the German Chamber. SAP is a long-term friend and partner. We enjoy a close collaboration between the Chamber, but also with the Embassy and the Foreign Ministries, as well as with the Australian government. As we know, the bilateral strength of this relationship was also founded at the Australian-German Working Group and the G20 many, many years ago. And I think despite many distances and not being able to travel for almost over 2 years, we have enjoyed rejuvenation and revitalization, and we are very inspired this afternoon with that we might be able to travel soon and open up and bring both delegations, countries and colleagues and friends together again. From an SAP point of view, the topics chosen are very close to our heart. It aligns with SAP's mission around helping customers and partners to the path to zero. The reason why I'm saying this is because we have actually a very committed SAP executive board and also leading with the Australian market unit when it comes to zero emissions, zero waste and zero inequality. And I think that the way this afternoon will be structured with the panels, it's very important that we're looking forward to hearing from a lot of the experts and a lot of international guests as well, and I'm very excited. I'm also very delighted to welcome our Chamber patron, His Excellency Dr. Thomas Fitschen, the German ambassador to Australia. And a lot of you probably know Dr. Fitschen. He joined the German Foreign Services in 1990. He worked in the fields of international law and UN affairs. He's an expert in security policy and also counterterrorism. Dr. Fitschen worked in the German embassy as an ambassador and had postings in Manila and New York and Geneva. And in 2019, Dr. Fitschen came to Australia, and he is since then a very close friend and a patron to all activities and initiatives which we are holding him in very high regards. His Excellency is a lawyer by training, and he holds a doctorate in international law. And I would like to welcome His Excellency Dr. Thomas Fitschen to speak a few words to us virtually, unfortunately, today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your kind words, dear Karen. We are actually hearing from Canberra that there are technical problems at the moment. So we might have to wait or jump into the panel, because what I hear now is that we do not have a steady line to Canberra. Please excuse me for that. I think then let's jump right into panel one, healthy humans. And we ask our patron ambassador, Dr. Fitschen, to please join in later, and instead of doing a welcome remark, doing a closing remark. And with that, I have the great honor and pleasure to actually start the first panel. I would like to introduce you to Hanna Niederbuchner, who is our cluster manager for health and will be your moderator for the next and very exciting panel. Thank you very much. Over to you, dear Hanna.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for the introduction, and also thank you to Karen, thanks to our summit sponsor, SAP, and to our panel sponsor, Merck. I do invite my two speakers, Sarah and Sirk, to please turn on your camera and microphone now. Perfect. Thanks so much. So, welcome everyone to the first panel. My name is Hannah. I am the cluster manager for the health cluster of the German Chamber. As Christoph mentioned, we have recently established 4 industry clusters which aim to connect industry stakeholders. We are providing market intelligence. We do organize topical events and also offer networking opportunities, to name just a few of the benefits. For the health market, we're looking especially at the sectors pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, and life sciences, but also at medical devices and digital health. So today you will hear 4 panel discussions, and we're starting off with a topic that I think we would all like to put to rest. It is COVID-19. Unfortunately, we cannot quite put that behind us yet, because Australia and I think also the rest of the world have been held hostage by it for the past few months. So everyone's talking about the Delta variant at the moment, and it's a virus's nature to mutate all of the time. Some of these changes are inconsequential, but as we've seen with Delta, other changes and mutations are just a lot more threatening and damaging to our health and also to society. So today with us here, we have 2 experts. We have Sirk Pötting, who is the COO of BioNTech. They are servicing the Australian market together with their partner Pfizer. And Sirk is one of Germany's most prominent faces in the vaccine rollout since the start of the pandemic. And we are also welcoming Sarah Fadi, who is a part of the leadership team of Merck Life Sciences in Australia. She is a passionate science communicator, and Sarah is also educating people about COVID-19 on her platform Fadi Facts, and very happy to share a link with you that you can check that platform out later. So on our agenda today, we're going to dive into 3 topics in particular. We're going to look at the origin of viruses, where they come from, how they mutate. We are also going to have a look at how effective vaccines are developed. And then we're going to have a look behind the scenes to learn a bit more about the vaccine rollout and how a supply chain is established. Now, let's start at the beginning with Sarah. Could you please tell us a bit more about where viruses originate from and why do they mutate?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the really nice introduction, Hannah. It's so nice to be here at my first German-Australian virtual event, and to be a part of the Growth Summit talking about healthy humans. Makes me really happy. As you said, I'm very passionate about science communication. I live and breathe science. So a little bit more background before we dive straight into what viruses are and where they came from. Not only am I on the leadership team at Merck, but I'm a scientist. So I'm a virologist and I'm an immunologist. And I spent the first 10 years of my career working on pandemic influenza. So I come with this really deep understanding of the difference of different types of viruses, and also what it takes to get a pandemic virus. Because, you know, virus has been in our vernacular and in our news for a long, long time. We've had Ebola, influenza, we've had Zika. We've actually had COVID before. Everyone will remember we had SARS. And so that made a big splash at the time. And, you know, SARS was in the media for about 2 years before it kind of just faded away. But what we have right now in front of us is SARS-CoV-2, which is the original SARS, and it had a mutation to turn into this second variant of the original SARS. So if we think about where viruses have come from, we have to consult history, and we have to try and understand what's been done to look into where viruses originated. And it kind of displeases me to say that we don't know where viruses came from. There is lots of different stories of evolution of viruses. I think one that resonates the best with me is that they are an ancient machine, okay? That they've always needed something else to become functional, and they cannot operate on their own. So what we can see from history, we don't have fossils or anything like that because they're not a living organism. They can't be visualized in the past in fossils. What we do is we look into vertebrates and we try and find DNA or RNA that doesn't match the species of origin that we're looking at. And that's how we've been able to track viruses through history. So they are millions of years old, but we don't have an exact origin. And it's potentially that they were an ancient machine that were able to operate outside of another living organism, but essentially they need a host. So we have to look into the host to try and find where they came from. There are some evidence of viruses that have been able to be extracted from ice. So as global warming heats up the earth, and then we are having to access these different levels of ice, we can extract particles out of there that are these RNA and DNA origins, but it doesn't help us in the whole history of origins and where they came from. So in a nutshell, we don't really know, but they do need a living host to move through time. And what we actually have seen in recent history is that we've been able to show evolution of viruses as they progress and as they mutate with a host. So I think one of the best examples we have of that is the herpes virus, where it has actually evolved through time with humans to be able to continue to infect human cells. So I'm sorry, I can't give you a full origin of viruses, but the best evidence we have is that they mutate through time with a host species.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Unfortunately, no answer, but I think
sorry.
that's the point with a lot of those things where we don't really know where they come from, but we still, have them here at the moment, and need to also find a cure and a defense against them. So
that's it. And I think one of the big sources of our understanding of virus evolution and where they came from is actually some of the more ancient species that we have in our ecosystem, like bats. Viruses have been able to survive in bats in a really symbiotic relationship where they are able to survive, they don't overtake the host, and so they are evolving through time with bats. So we can look back to more of those ancient species to look at the preservation of big, large pools of viruses through time, but that's really all we have at the moment.
Yeah, so what would you say, how do we go about fighting them actually, and how do we develop vaccines against them?
Yeah, so I think we can look to those ancient species and we can look, what are the differences in an immune system in those ancient species that allows a relationship between a virus that might be very infectious and deadly in a human or a vertebrate host compared to how it's surviving and not impacting the host of, say, a bat. And so we can look at the differences of immune system and think, okay, well, what are the triggers of a bat's immune system that allow it to function in this kind of really balanced way? And we can adapt that understanding we have from that immune system and apply it to therapies. So without going too deep into it, there is this whole level of receptors in our system called toll-like receptors, and it's part of our innate immune response. And we can look at how bats and humans have differences in their innate immune responses and adapt that understanding to develop therapies to help our immune systems act more like a bat. So we have vaccines, and that's a really great way to, stop a virus in its tracks and prevent it from transmitting and evolving with a host. But we also have this other side where we can look at therapies to try and mimic other immune systems that are able to cope with virus infections.
It's really fascinating to have those two sides of it. If we're talking about vaccines, maybe you could give us just a high-level bit of information about mRNA vaccination and what's new about them.
Yeah, okay. So actually, mRNA vaccines have been around for about 20 years. This is one of the big misconceptions, is that we've had mRNA technology in the lab probably for about the last 35 years, and we've adapted that technology to work in vaccines and look at vaccine approaches with mRNAs for about the last 20. We've even had an mRNA vaccine in a clinical trial right here in Australia. So anybody who's interested can look up the work of Professor Paul Griffin from, Infectious Disease Institute in Queensland, and you'll see that we have had clinical trials of mRNA vaccines before, but, it hasn't been at a time where it's been so important for the world to have a rapid vaccine developed. So what do we know about mRNA vaccines? Well, it is a new technology and we don't have the full history in the clinical space, but they are there. We've got a really deep understanding of what the technology is capable of, what it's not capable of, and where it can go. And the fact that we've been able to produce a vaccine with an mRNA backbone in it in 12 to 18 months is, first of all, testament to the fact that the entire scientific community is working collaboratively together, but also this technology is super robust and we've been able to do large manufacture scale-ups because of the integrity of the science we had prior to coming into this pandemic. And we already had vaccine candidate technologies on the market that would be like a plug and play for something like this in the future. And that's where we're at with the mRNA vaccines. And the plug and play technology means that we're able to look at the antigen of interest or the virus of interest, quickly take off the most important pieces and put it into this click and play technology. And that's how we might be able to adapt to variants in the future that maybe we aren't seeing protected by current vaccines on the market. That's not the case with the Delta strain. We still have quite high protection, but in the future, as vaccines, as viruses mutate, to avoid things like social distancing, or they avoid things like, having a long time, between cleaning on surfaces, you'll see that the viruses start to adapt to become better at surviving in environments and better at transmitting between hosts. But we do have that click and play technology with mRNA vaccines to be able to keep up with what's happening with the evolution of the virus.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah. It's really fascinating to have that scientific background. I think it does help us understand a bit more about it, and also, as you said, what we have to expect in the future, as they are constantly mutating, and we'll have new variants occurring possibly very soon. So that's the quick overview of the science behind it, but there's also the challenge of actually distributing the vaccine and getting it to the people. So this is something where Sieg is going to tell us a bit more about. Maybe you could start with just telling us, how did you go about establishing the supply chain?
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, and thank you for the invitation to speak at the Growth Summit here. So, I mean, maybe a couple of words up front, because it's very, as Sarah also pointed out, I think key priority, whatever we do, is like to have a very safe and effective vaccine. And this technology didn't fall from the sky in the last year. So mRNA technology has been around, as Sarah alluded to, and we have been working on this technology for over 20 years. And since 2012-13, we have been in clinical trials on cancer vaccines, actually. So this is a technology we know very well, actually, and it was just ready. So I think with our infrastructure and with the preparation to use mRNA as infectious disease vaccines, we were, we actually were at the sweet spot. We were ready when the pandemic came, actually. So that's why we were able to quickly respond to that. And when you ask, like, so how do you build a supply chain like this? I mean, there were a couple of design principles. We started off, we anticipated to build 1 billion doses in 2021. So when we started to raise funding to be able to go through all these programs and also to develop the candidates while we were in clinical trials with the first candidates and trying out which one is the best one actually. So we started ramp up our facilities already. So we planned at 1 billion doses for 2021. We are now at 3 billion doses for 2021. So a lot of stuff actually happened in the meantime. I think what was crucial to scale up very fast and get a partner on board with Pfizer. We have a very experienced partner in scale-up operations. So, and we put our strengths together. We brought the technology and the scale-up and tech transferred everything to Pfizer as soon as possible. We built up a network from Pfizer and BioNTech over a couple of countries. So we built facilities in the US, in Europe, in Tours, in Belgium, and in Germany. We built our own facility for BioNTech, or bought that from Novartis, our Marburg facility, which will have a capacity of 1 billion doses per year, end of this year. And we brought many partners on board. So we have like by now 20 sites supporting this whole vaccine production, and it's growing. So we're still looking for like what other partners in regions of the world where we can add fill and finish, or do we have enough drug substance? How can we scale this up? So we are constantly changing and expanding this network. So design principles as much as possible, and the network grew together with a partner.
Yeah, and what were the main challenges that you faced? Because you did say that you built it up also a lot quicker than expected, going from an expected dose of 1 billion to 3 billion for 2021. How did you face any challenges doing that? What's the biggest?
I think there were two things especially striking. The one was we had mRNA in a 1 gram scale. So that's a couple of thousand units actually. And we did this a couple of times per year for our clinical trials. And when we sat down, we said like 1 gram is not enough. 1 gram per week or 1 gram per 2 weeks. We need rather a few kilos actually per week. And so that scale up from 1 gram to something sizable happened actually from March to June last year. So we bought equipment, we transferred the process, and really tried to make it. So at that point in time, Pfizer was still receiving, so to say, the tech transfer, and they didn't know the technology that well back then. And we cleaned out some clean rooms. So we threw out some equipment, opened we had like big liquid handling machine standing there. So we opened the wall, moved the equipment out, closed it again, requalified the clean room, and had space to actually experiment and get this up to a reasonable scale. So then we had like scales of 250 to 300 gram per run. And that was a scale where we said, like, okay, if we take this one and scale it out, that should probably work. And then you have to buy all the equipment, certain lead times, you have to buy a lot of stuff at risk, you have to qualify facilities all over the world at risk, build this stuff in and ramp it up. So apparently it worked. So the other obstacle that was also in our hands, but a little bit different in the obstacles, was raw materials. So there was a good portion of like enzymes and so on that was available, I would say, and the suppliers were actually able to ramp it up with enough lead time. But then there were the famous lipids that actually encapsulate the mRNA to have it safe and make sure that lots of mRNA actually goes into the right cells in the body. And these lipids, they were custom tailored for mRNA. So they were developed for mRNA, and because there was this gram standard that everybody used in the lab, there was not really much around, and there was not really any commercial capacity around. So you couldn't go to the suppliers and tell them, like, could you please ramp up, because it was really very small. So you had to really help them and support them financially and with technology, so that they were able to actually ramp it up to commercial scale. And that took some time because it really started from scratch. It was like some very special herb that just doesn't grow. And after a while, I mean, now we don't have these bottlenecks anymore, and there's enough lipids around. But coming from a technology that was never commercialized, it was a problem. So,
yeah, I can imagine. And now, when we also look at mutations that are occurring, and as Sarah said, it might not be necessary for the Delta variant to change the vaccine, but for potential future variants, how does BioNTech prepare for that? And are there any issues with raw material supply coming from that?
Yeah, so now comes the beauty of the mRNA. So once you have the process set up, actually, it really works. You build a blueprint, and then this blueprint is copied into the mRNA. And once you have this process steps in place, so this copying into the mRNA, multiplying the mRNA, encapsulating it in lipids and filling it. So once you have this process in place, mutations are not, let me call it, shouldn't be that scary anymore, because if the mutation is not too bad and you can find the new sequence of the vaccine quickly, and by now we are constantly looking at these variants. So we have basically around about 25 variants or so that occurred so far. We all test them in the lab, and we have a new blueprint available for all of those. Yeah. So if something comes along that's not effective enough anymore, so I agree with Sarah. So what we are seeing right now, it looks like the Delta variant is still well enough covered by the current vaccine. But if something new comes along, we need to get the blueprint going, which takes a couple of weeks. But within 100 days, we aim at 100 days, we will have commercial quantities with the new adapted virus. So as long as the spike protein that we are targeting with the vaccine doesn't mutate too badly, we have a good process in place, actually.
Well, that's really good news to hear, I think, that the process is in place and won't need too many modifications for the vaccine production. What would you say do you see as the long-term strategy for mRNA vaccine production, to have that in all parts of the world, especially when we're speaking about just equality worldwide for the distribution?
Yeah, and I think there is a two-pronged approach that we try to follow, and one is we have our big factories. Pfizer has the big factories. We have our big Marburg factory and our contract manufacturing partners. So we need to maximize everything that we can do from these big factories for right now at the moment, because this is running very smoothly. The supply chain is set up, and we have a very steady output of a 3-shift model, basically, so people work around the clock. And that's why we have the aim of distributing 2 billion doses in the next 18 months to low and middle income countries. So that's the one approach, as much as possible from the current facilities. On the other hand, it's also very clear that you have this local inequality. Actually, unfortunately, where it's produced, that's where it's initially distributed. I think that's what we have seen right now. That's what we have seen in other pandemics, and we have to overcome this. So we plan to go more and more local as quickly as possible. So, for example, we brought on some partners for certain steps of the process. In South Africa, it's BioVac, and then it's Europharma in Brazil, so that certain steps can be done local. So basically, you ship a pre-product, like formulated mRNA to the countries, and start off with a fill and finish in the various countries for local manufacturing. And then we have plans to really bring mRNA technology to local countries. So, for example, we are at BioNTech, we are aiming as a side product also of malaria development. We want mRNA production in local countries. So we are working on smaller facilities that you can then pitch up in the various countries. You need a local fill and finish there, and then you can distribute it, produce it, and distribute it locally. So we have in our minds are now South Africa with the BioVac partnership, and then we're talking Senegal and Rwanda, where we officially publicly talked about already, and there will be more to follow, actually, for local production of mRNA. Bring the technology where it's needed.
Yeah, that sounds great to have that in place and to already have those local partners, and keep on it to be able to have the production capabilities everywhere where people need it in the future. I think we're already at the end of our time here for that panel, but we were able to explore a few different topics. We looked at the history of vaccines, or what we know about viruses, and what we do know about them. We learned about mutations, and also about the supply chain and local production capabilities. Of course, there's a lot more to that topic that unfortunately we're not able to discuss today. but there are a lot of other diseases, illnesses, where we see a similar process of finding it first, or its first occurrence, then going through research to find a cure or vaccine that is crucial to our survival. And we hope to continue this conversation on March 24th in part 2 of our Growth Summit, and that time it will be in person. So very much looking forward to that. And yeah, now I would already like to take the opportunity to thank our two speakers, Sarah and Sirk. It's been great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise. Thanks for getting up so early, Sirk. I know it's early in Germany at the moment. If there's any question from the audience, unfortunately we don't have the Q&A on, but you can still pop them in the chat and we will forward them to the speakers. And also you have the opportunity to connect with them in the networking sessions after the next panel. So in the meantime, please enjoy the upcoming panels. And with that, I'm handing back over to Christoph.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, dear Hannah, dear Sarah, dear Sirk. That was really extremely interesting and exciting. And thanks again to both our speakers for joining very early in the morning. Thanks for Sarah for taking the afternoon, and really interesting to hear in this post-pandemic world where we kind of go into a new normal, but still have to focus on not just to tackle the virus, but also to organize supply chains. And it is fantastic to hear and promising that we have innovative answers to fight threats to healthy humans. Thanks very much for this great panel. As Hannah said, we will have the chance during our networking session to approach the speakers, and also thanks to our speakers for joining the networking session. That is absolutely fantastic. So you can mingle. That's why we used Remo. Please answer or ask your questions in that. And also I would like to invite you again, as Hannah just mentioned, to continue the conversation then next March in person. And dear Sirk, we hope that you can make it over here. We heard that there are great plans, potential plans for BioNTech here in Australia on mRNA, and the same with Merck. So maybe we can all mingle together in person then soon. So thanks again for this great panel. I have now the great honor to hand over to the next panel, which is what we call beautiful intelligence. And I would like to introduce you to our cluster manager and moderator, Matthias Suter, who will now introduce us in the world of beautiful intelligence together with wonderful speakers. Over to you, dear Matthias. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christoph, for the kind introduction, and a big welcome as well to all the delegates today from my side. Firstly, I'd also like to thank SAP as summit sponsor, of course, to make this whole event possible, as well as Weidmüller as Beautiful Intelligence panel sponsor today. Now, as anyone that has ever spent a little bit of time with me would attest, I love my food and drink, both for all types of food, all sorts of drinks. So who better to look after the food and beverage cluster than myself, right? Jokes aside, whilst I would love for my cluster role to be about eating my way through the Australian food and beverage landscape on company time, it really isn't. The cluster is about bringing together operators throughout the food and beverage industry, from agriculture over production or machinery and packaging producers, all the way through to service providers specialized to the food and beverage industry, for example, like logistics. Back to my love for food, though, or for drinks in particular first. I was recently on a sunny afternoon, as they sometimes come down to Melbourne as well, sitting on my balcony enjoying a local beer from a craft brewery just near my house here called Wolf of the Willows, a fantastic pale ale, highly recommended. But whilst I was sipping that beer, I was wondering, or I was asking myself, how a small brewery like that really achieves a consistent taste across a rather wide variety of different beers, how they change their production to really always get it spot on. And the great thing was, actually, as we were preparing this panel, I came across Wolf of the Willows again, and we're going to hear a little bit about that later on. But the answer for Wolf of the Willows in particular lies in digitalizing and the production facility for them. Our first speaker that I'd like to introduce to you today, Leonie Wong, has actually worked very closely with Wolf of the Willows. Leonie is currently the head of digital enterprise for Siemens Australia and has previously been responsible for Siemens food and beverage business development here in Australia. She brings a vast experience from working with manufacturers translating concepts of digitalization and Industry 4.0 into actionable plans to today's discussion. Our second valued speaker is Raphael Koenig from our panel sponsor Weidmuller. A big welcome to you as well, Raphael. Raphael was trained as an electrical engineer, and he has become somewhat of an entity, I would say, in all things automation and Industry 4.0 over the last 25 years, with a lot of experience in that field. Again, welcome to you both. Thank you very much for making the time to join us all today. Now, firstly, it's not going to be all about beer today, I promise. That will be a little paired with the case study to give you a bit of an overview of how we're going to go through the next 20 odd minutes. We're going to start with a brief overview over the big trends within industrial automation given to you by Raphael. Then we'll have an in-depth look at our case study, Wolf of the Willows, before we're going to have a discussion surrounding open innovation and the need for collaboration to really drive technological adaptation. With all that being said, Raphael, I'd like to hand over to you for your introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthias. Yeah, as you heard just before, I'm an electrical engineer, which means I love numbers, apparently. Actually, I love numbers and I love innovation, which means otherwise I would have probably become an accountant. So I want to start off with showing you some numbers, which are very, very important. And to soften it up a little bit, I've put some beer cans in there too. So a few facts and figures about IoT, industrial IoT, Internet 4.0, and I just take this out of here. There you go. So digitalization and IoT are megatrends that transform not only the food and beverage industry, but the manufacturing sectors at large. The trend in numbers gives some insight of what we're facing in the upcoming years. So let's start with the development. By 2025, there will be 5 times as many devices, IoT devices, in the field than there were 2015. So we're talking about 75.4 billion devices in the projected growth for IoT is also staggering. And we're looking here between 2017 and 2022 from $170 billion US to $560 billion. That again, in a growth summit, that is real growth. And the most use cases are actually not the home cases. They are not the management of freight monitoring. It is manufacturing organizations, what we speak from. So that is the really exciting part of what we're facing on here. 91% of industrial companies invest in development of smart factories. But to this point in time, only 1% of the data that is generated in a factory is actually transformed and used and then evaluated. Now, what are the real benefits of the Internet of Things? And there's a number of different reasons we are looking at, and I've listed them up here. So 47% of those people decide to go for that is improving operational efficiency. That is then followed by improving productivity. Yeah. Then we see the desire to create new business opportunities, reducing downtime, maximizing the asset utilization, the ability to sell product as a service, and we see reducing asset life cycle, and also one of the next points is worker safety, as well as enhancing product innovation. And of course, we have to also realize that not everything is a greenfield, a new application. There's lots and lots of brownfield existing manufacturing plants which need upgrading. But if we speak about the benefits of IoT, we also need to talk about the challenges to the adoption. And there is one. We're talking about total transparency. Total transparency is contradictory to security, unfortunately, which means that is one of the biggest challenges that has been identified. And we hear more and more about what cybersecurity really, the relevance it has. The lack of standardization, really a system that you adopt only really works if it's on an open platform. And that again is the part of legacy installed base. So as I said before, there's lots and lots of manufacturing sites which have already got systems in place which are not ready for updating, but which need to be updated. Then the skills development is another one that really needs to be following, and we need to have the people here in Australia to do that. Data integrity, internal system barriers, and that's what where we see the convergence of IT and OT, for example. Liability and social political concerns. Every time we talk about automation, the first question that a politician asks, is that costing me employment? And that is not the case. It's enhancing your profitability. So the next thing is, we speak, and why is it so important for us? I want to talk a little bit how can we actually manage this type of bringing innovation into place. So what is the pathway to successful innovation of IoT? I'm referring it to a construct which is called the 10 types of innovation. That has been done by an American innovation researcher by the name of Larry Keeley. And they, over a time of 10 years, looked at where companies actually put their money to create innovation. So, and what you see, or what they saw there, we just is that most companies actually put most of their innovation efforts into developing products and product systems. So the other parts that we look at, if we look at configuration, that is, for example, how does the company make money? Who does the company work with? How is the company structured? What processes does it have? And then the product, that is just basically the offering. And the last part here on the right, that is the experience. So how does a company actually interact with its customers? So what Keeley and his team found out, though, is that in 10 years, in terms of less than 2% of the projects produce more than 90% of the value. And interestingly enough, it does not really come from the product and the product system. It comes from the configuration. So how do you make your money? Who do you make it with? What's your structure and processes, and how you interact with your customers, from service to customer engagement. So that is quite an interesting way, but it also shows that the network that we're working in has got the highest yield of creating innovation. So no company can or should do everything alone. Collaborations can be brief or enduring, and they can be formed between close allies or even staunch competitors. And that is, for me, the embodiment of what the chamber does. It brings us together to work on a common goal. Yeah, and if it's in technology, if it's in many other things, but that is, for me, the part. I want to give you the most obvious example that comes from my life, from my company, in terms of these networks. There is an organization, I put the link in a little later. It's called ITS-OWL. ITS-OWL stands for Intelligent Technical Systems Ostwestfalia-Lippe. So for those guys of you who are from Germany, probably know Ostwestfalia-Lippe. That's where companies like Weidmüller are. That's where we go in the cellar to laugh. So not much humor there. So this organization has got more than 200 companies researching improvements in Industry 4.0. And you also find companies there like staunch of our competitors, Beckhoff, Harting, Lenzi, Phoenix Contact, Wago, Weidmüller. We all work together on the common goal to develop the technology there, because what we understand is at the core of Industry 4.0, digitalization and IoT, is the need for interoperability. So we have to be able to work together. In Germany in particular, we have got a very, very strong leader in the industry, And I'm glad that we have Leon here today representing that. But I think the German secret is that the Mittelstand, which we represent, are the SMEs, is able to really work very, very closely with a company like Siemens and make it a success. And it's more than a coexistence, it's a collaboration. So with that, I'm through with my part. As you can see, I've put some of these nice beer cans up there. And I've got the link here for the video, but I would like to hand over to Leonie now to talk a little bit more about the Wolf of the Willows.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Raphael. And I know that with the time constraint, we don't have the time to share the video with you live, but the link is there for you to watch. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Wolf of the Willows. So Wolf of the Willows is one of many Siemens automation is used at, and Siemens offers automation solutions to a number of food and beverage manufacturers of all sizes. And what makes us really proud to be talking about a case study like Wolf of the Willows is showcasing that digitalization and industrial Internet of Things is accessible to manufacturers of all sizes. So this craft brewery is located in the suburb of Mordialloc in Melbourne, and they are a small business who was actually very severely impacted by the pandemic. So previously, before the pandemic, most of Wolf of the Willows' revenue stream was to supply kegs of beer to pubs and clubs. And as you know, with the many lockdowns that Melbourne has endured, pubs and restaurants and clubs have had to shut, which has caused Wolf of the Willows to really have a bit of a panic as to how are they going to continue getting their product out the door. Secondly to that, the other constraint that they were facing was capacity, because as a craft brewer gets their product out into the market and consumers learn to discover about the amazing flavors and tastes that they're creating, the demand can surge quite quickly. And so they were capacity constrained as to how can they increase their operational efficiency to be able to meet that need. So this is where technology can kind of come in to help. So between Siemens, together with the local OEM who is supplying the solution and the end user, we all worked together to be able to provide an automation solution which gave them increased transparency and visibility into their process via automation. And what that did is that it allowed them to be able to automate the processes of brewing and fermentation of their product, and it reduced the time in which it took for a batch of beer to be started to completion. Originally, they would estimate that a batch of beer would take up to 25 days from start to finish before it would be ready to either put into a keg or put into a can and ready for distribution. Through the implementation of technology, they were able to gain operational insights as to what was going on to drive better decision making. So it is like Raphael was saying, if a lot of the data is being collected but not used, it doesn't really create value. But if you are collecting that data and using that to drive better decision making, in which Wolf of the Willows were able to do, they were able to reduce the time in which it took to complete a batch of beer and being brewed from 25 days to 18 days. So what that created for them was the ability to supply more product to the market in a quicker time frame without having to increase the capacity of their plant. And this is just one really great example of where, even in a pandemic, investment in technology has been able to create real value for them. So, Matthias?
Fantastic. Thanks, Leonie. I might jump in. Firstly, thanks so much for giving the audience a bit of an overview about Wolf of the Willows, and Raphael as well, of course, over the whole industry trends. And I'd like to circle back on that a little bit. Just a few of those staggering numbers at the start, Raphael. I think what I found interesting is the 5 times increase of IoT connected devices between 2015 and 2025. But at the same time, you said that only about 1% of all the data collected really is evaluated. So that's not a whole lot. So if we connect more devices and don't you think we're going to have a lot more data? Are organizations actually ready to use all that data, do something with it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of aspects to that. One is, firstly, you have to provide the interconnectivity and the sensors on the machine. That's physical. That's physical. Then you have to have the information transparency, which means there needs to be the process then to get the data to securely to the cloud. And that is what's really going to create the massive influx of use of the technology. At the moment, what we see, most of the data that are generated are used on the operational floor, so to control machines, to have operational aspects. In future, what we want to do is get all these data to the cloud systems, or what we're doing more and more, and then evaluate them and do the decision processes that Leonie alluded to.
Fantastic, thank you. Another big part that I took out of both of your brief presentations is the need for networking, need for collaboration. And I don't know how it went for the audience. What happened in my head whilst you were explaining it, at first you talked about solutions providers networking between each other. So I saw a linear connection, but then obviously the client comes in, so it became sort of a triangular relationship. But I think obviously there is a lot of collaboration needed within organizations as well. And Leonie, question for you there. Who do you usually see as sort of the owner for IoT or for digitalization projects within an organization? Is that more an IT question? Is that an OT, an operation technology, or is that a C-suite deal there?
Oh, that's a good question. Thanks for that, Matthias. I think that what we are seeing is that ambitions towards implementing a digital transformation in any type of manufacturing environment tend to be driven from the top, but tend to have stakeholders from all throughout an organization, because most industrial IoT solutions or digital transformation initiatives, the ambition of which is to provide more data and more transparency as to what is going on. But that data could be beneficial to multiple stakeholders within an organization, not just the production and engineering team, but it could also be the quality laboratory, it could be the warehousing people, it could be the sales people, it could be anyone. And so as a result, having an understanding of the various needs from various parts of the business is very important in order for us to be able to cater and develop a solution that meets as many of those needs as possible. What we also find is that sometimes there can be contradicting needs and contradicting demands within a business itself. And so that is part of the challenge of why there is a need to have a really great collaboration within the ecosystem of technology vendors such as Wiedmuller and Siemens, together with machine builders and the end user and systems integrators and process designers, that we are all coming together and understanding that we are all heading toward the same ambition of being able to implement Industry 4.0 in the industrial manufacturing space, but be able to understand how we can translate the technology that we have on offer and how that directly relates to helping our end users address those critical business needs of being able to address, how do I make more with less? How do I increase my production efficiency? How do I reduce wastage? How do I increase my sustainability and environmental footprint? All of these are key questions which need to be looked at from multiple angles. So I think having that open collaboration and open discussion is very important.
Thanks, Leonie. That's a great insight. I think whilst we're looking at the inside of a company or what the driving forces are, can you maybe run us through a little bit of the process when you're approached by a potential client? Where do you start with an IoT project?
Yeah. Well, this is what makes my job so fun, actually, Matthias, because whenever we are working with any client on any digital transformation or industrial IoT initiative, there is no prescriptive roadmap that says you must follow a sequence of steps in order to achieve this outcome, because the goal actually changes depending on who you're talking to. Also, the install base is different depending on who you're talking to. No two factories that we've ever visited have ever been exactly the same. They all have different challenges of what they're trying to produce. They all have different challenges associated with the install base that they have. And so you'll have some factories which have equipment which could be quite old, and legacy equipment which could be, sometimes 20 or even 30 years old, ranging from equipment that they may have just bought last year that's just being commissioned right now. And so the challenges exist around how do you have that interoperability, like what Raphael was saying. You collect and connect all of the equipment that is there to be able to get that transparency. And then once you have all that information connected and collected, What are you trying to achieve? And so because the starting point for every factory is a little bit different and the finishing point is also a little bit different, that is why we have that need to have that open communication and collaboration together to be able to move towards like effectively an evolving and moving target.
Thanks, Leonie. Now, I do sometimes like to play a little bit of a devil's advocate, and I think I might just throw a couple of questions in like that today as well. My first one to go to Raphael, just in regards to the need for collaboration. And as you said with ITAL, there is a lot of staunch competitors in there that work together. Now, my first thought when you mentioned that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one within the audience as well, was what about danger of collusion? Don't you guys have a bit of market controlling powers there?
I don't think so. And it's not the goal that we're doing. I think to carry on a little bit of what Leonie said before, what companies like us and many in our network have to do is they have to change and adapt their business model. It's no longer enough to ask a customer as a supplier, here's what I have, can you use it? It's what is your problem? How can I help you solve it? And that sort of goes there. The aspect of collusion is one that really would only come up, in my opinion, when we talk about fixing prices, fixing conditions, and that is while it's OWL, for example, I can guarantee you we are the biggest competitors that you will find out in the market. There is no love loss when we can't go to the sales side. Yeah, so there's a very healthy a drive to say we need to make this realize. We need interoperability, so we need to all be able to talk to each other technically, but also on a personal level. That is for me the biggest benefit that working in networks actually brings here.
So as a takeaway there, it's really about finding solutions and not about the
business and the sales process is something that happens later.
Mm-hmm. And we're all engineers. We absolutely love talking about the technology and love making things work together. Pricing, that's somebody else's problem.
Fair enough. Fantastic. Now, the other bit of a question I did have for you guys is in regards to the need for change for organizations. So, Leonie, you said with Wolf of the Willows, it was the pandemic that caused them to go, hang on, we can't sell our beer to pubs because, well, pubs are shut and no one's going to drink it. So we need to fill it into cans. Now, are we going to need a terrible thing to happen every few years to drive change, or do you think we're sort of on a rolling? We had a bit of a start here, and now we can keep rolling on with it.
Wow, I do think that what the pandemic did was that it accelerated the need for change, but I don't think that it's going to take another catastrophe like a pandemic to continue to drive innovation.
I think that's good news right there.
I think that, yeah, I think that many food and beverage manufacturers in Australia are very much driven for answering their customer demand. And as we can see with a lot of the consumers, like particularly in the craft beer sector, they are becoming more educated about different flavor profiles. They want to be delighted with new varieties. They want to see what's going on, and they want to be able to understand more about how their product was made and was it made in a sustainable way. And so because of the evolving consumer demand, I think that is what is driving innovation. Secondly to that, I think the environmental sustainability requirements of being able to sustainably feed a growing population with the finite resources that we have is another push that will continue to drive technological innovation to reduce waste, reduce the use of energy, but still continue to produce a consistent and high quality product.
Fantastic input. Thanks, Leonie. Now, 30 minutes isn't a whole lot of time to discuss the vast topic as ours. But I'd like to sort of round the topic off to get a last input from both of you to our audience of what they should, if nothing else, what they should be taking away from today. Raphael, I might start with your last.
Okay, and it actually is seamless to the last question what Leonie just said. The term Industry 4.0 started off officially in Germany in 2011. And from very early days, it was basically a call to arms for the German industry to say, hey guys, you need to improve your manufacturing productivity and efficiency to stay competitive. if you look at, nobody would have foreseen that the German automotive industry can still be competitive. And it can be because it's not a switch turning revolution, digitalization on and non-digitalization off. It's a process that has been very, very long. In Australia, actually, luckily enough, the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force that was led by Jeff Connolly at the time already started with that process in 2014. And it's really, that is the reason why in Australia, Industry 4.0 and digitalization are also very, very known equation in the process of getting our act together. And we have seen a number of reports, especially from Jens and his team, that show that manufacturing is very, very important for us. And I think that the pandemic, to come back to that one, has really enforced that too. We see massive disruptions in the supply chains, which means Industry 4.0 and the ability to reduce lot sizes to almost one and be still productive and then efficient in manufacturing will give us, will, in my opinion, cause the return of manufacturing to Australia.
Fantastic, thanks, Alpha. I think what you just said about the importance of manufacturing, that's very true right there, especially in the food and beverage sector. I think it's the biggest part of the Australian manufacturing industry, so definitely something to keep in mind. Leonie, what's your key takeaway for our audience?
I think the key takeaway that I would like everybody to think about is the fact that digital transformation is not a far future concept. It's something that is happening right now, and that to gain benefit from it, you can actually start small. So I think that if anything, it's think big, but start small and scale fast.
Fantastic. So good. Thank you very much. Now, again, as I just said, 30 minutes for a huge topic isn't a whole lot. Thank you both for making the time today. And I've already seen there's a question that's popped up in our Q&A. Now, unfortunately, we don't have time right now to answer it. And I have a lot of questions, and the question that popped up is one of them. What about staff needs? Do I need to retrain my staff? Do I need to hire new people? There's other things about, is there options or possibilities for the IoT beyond productivity? So what about driving sustainability, and what about data security? So I think that's all things that I really would like answered, and we will definitely answer them. Unfortunately not today though. You'll have to wait, dear audience, until March 24th for the second part of our Growth Summit. If you have any immediate questions for our speakers, though, you don't have to wait until March. Please do post questions to them during our networking session, just in a few minutes. Only if you have any questions for the in regards to the food and beverage cluster, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about that, feel free to approach me as well during the networking. Now, with all that said, just one quick hint again: the case study that we looked at about Wolf of the Willows, Raphael posted that video link in the chat as well, so you can go and have a look at that at your free time, so you don't miss any of the summit today. Again, thanks so much, Raphael and Leonie, for joining us today. Again, thank you to SAP for the summit sponsorship, and of course Weidmuller for the beautiful intelligence panel. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Christoph. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Matthias. Thank you very much, Leonie and Raphael. So much value and beauty in this panel again. Great discussion, great insights. And thanks for sharing the story of Wolf of Willows. I'd love to empty a few of those with you together, of course. And thanks also, Raphael, for nailing it on the chamber, on what the chamber is all about and what manufacturing is all about. I'm really pleased that we had this discussion, and please feel all invited to continue that, not just in March, but we will continue to drive that in our cluster as well. Now, having said that, it's a great honor and pleasure for me to welcome you, our German ambassador, Dr. Fiona Pitzen. Great to have you now here. Thanks for joining, and now I would like to welcome, to hand over to you for your welcome speech. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can we do a quick microphone test? Can you hear me? No.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you well. No. We can hear you well, yeah, Ambassador.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Very well.
we can hear you, baby.
Good. Well, dear Christoph von Spessart, dear Karen Zwissler, and members of the board and the chamber, dear summit delegates, my apologies, first of all, for the technical glitch. Had I been the first speaker on the list, as was foreseen, I would have said that I was extremely pleased to help kick off the first virtual German-Australian Growth Summit, but it's already going. So while we are still unable to meet in person due to the ongoing COVID outbreak in the eastern half of Australia, there seems to be a clear roadmap at least and a matching vaccination effort in place for the entire nation to emerge from the lockdowns. So this will hopefully not only get us back to something like normalcy in being able to travel and meet with each other, which we have missed so dearly. It will also unchain business and hopefully kickstart the economic recovery. It is therefore extremely timely and important to have this kind of German-Australian exchange. As we have seen in the program, we have a very impressive lineup of high-level speakers on how to shape economic growth and post-pandemic recovery, and we have heard already from some of them, of course. The pandemic is far from over, and the impact on our economies is likely to be long-lasting. While many businesses have adapted in a remarkable fashion, hard-hit segments of our economies, such as the cultural sector, tourism, and uni education, still suffer from the consequences of lockdowns and closed borders. Global supply chains are under pressure. The current pause on skilled migration is exacerbating the skills shortage in this country. Furthermore, government budgets are reeling from unprecedented stimulus packages, which of course help to keep the economy afloat, but now create a huge debt burden for years to come. It is therefore urgent that the private sector returns to a trajectory of dynamic growth across the board. But the pandemic, and we have heard some ideas on that already, has also exposed multiple non-COVID induced vulnerabilities in our economies. For Germany and Europe, it has made clear that we cannot expect to simply resume our previous growth models and go back to business as before. At the same time, however, the huge task of overcoming COVID and reviving our economies must not distract us or serve as a cheap excuse from addressing other existential challenges, such as climate change and the necessary energy transition. B, Building Back Better, has become the motto for the process of growth, a resilient and sustainable recovery from COVID-19 and a better way of doing business in the future. That is why our experts in the OECD or the G20, for example, are working together on policies that reduce the likelihood of future shocks while also setting in motion or speeding up, depending on how you look at it, a just transition to a low-emission, climate-resilient economy. For that very reason, the EU's record 750 billion euros recovery package not only focuses strongly on promoting the modernization of our economies, innovation and digitization, it also reserves 30% of the entire funding for the fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. It is therefore very commendable that today's Growth Summit covers exactly this mix of highly prospective and future-oriented topics. Issues such as the production of and trade in green hydrogen or the mining of critical minerals to power the transition to e-mobility make a vital contribution to shifting our economies to more sustainable growth models, to decarbonizing our industries, and to creating future-proof green jobs. They also hold huge growth potential for our bilateral economic relations, which is why our governments are fully committed to supporting German-Australian business cooperation around these issues. For example, through the Hydrogen Accord, just announced by Prime Minister Morrison and Chancellor Merkel in June. Similarly, health, food and beverage, and Industry 4.0 are extremely dynamic areas which hold a massive potential for the modernization of our economies and ample room for productive cross-fertilization between German and Australian entrepreneurs. We can both have the good beer on both sides. I'm glad to see that the Chamber has already identified these issues as its own future focus areas. Ultimately, however, governments can only hope to set conducive framework conditions and to provide the right incentives for a resilient recovery. It is up to you as business leaders. It is you who develop innovative growth models, who take actual investment decisions and shape the development of our economies. It is therefore my pleasure to give the floor back to you to continue our discussions with the next panel. And I wish, of course, everyone a very productive and insightful discussion. And I hope to see you all in person live for the second part of the Growth Summit next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Excellency, and our dear friend and patron, Ambassador Dr. Fitschen, for joining us, for giving us the policy framework and background, and for highlighting and strengthening, again, the great development in the Australian-German relationships that are ever growing. Thank you so much for your contribution. I would now like to use the opportunity, because for the first time we will have a bit of a longer networking break, which is also part of a physical growth summit, and we really would not like to miss out on that, because we think it is very important. So we have with this software the opportunity to actually move to different tables. So if you find, and you can go with the mouse on, you see the floor plan. If you go with the cursor, so to say, on a table where you think that might be interesting and there's a free seat, you just go there, double click, and you will enter the room, and you will have a little discussion. Also, as mentioned, we have 3 different floors. So as you will see in a minute, you can mingle, you can go on different floors, and we would like to see you all back at 5:30 for our next panel. It will be Precious Earth, very exciting panel once again, but for now, please use the break for networking or for whatever you would like. You can even log out if you have to, but then again, we will encourage to come together and see you back here at 5:30. Thank you very much. Part 1 Virtual Growth Summit. I know this must have felt a bit different to virtually network, and I can promise you it will be a lot different when we all meet again next March, hopefully. I'm very happy now to introduce our third panel, Precious Earth, we named it. And we have a really interesting program, 2 fantastic speakers, and we have a wonderful moderator. That's our cluster manager for mining and resources, Jürgen Waldstabe, who has actually joined me here in our little studio. So please allow a few seconds. I will hand over to Jürgen now, and he will speak to you about Precious Earth. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Christoph. I am Jürgen, and I'm heading the mining cluster at the German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And also I'm leading the Competence Center for Mining and Resources at the Chamber. And the main tasks of the Competence Center are to provide information about resources and mining companies in Australia for the German industry, and also facilitate an exchange between Australian and German companies. And also we are supporting German mining suppliers that are active in Australia. Before I introduce our other panelists that can already join the panel, I would like to draw your attention to something, and I would like to ask my colleague Max to share a quick slide, which you should be able to see on the screen now. So we all agree that electric cars are the future of transport, and at least for private transportation. So the question is, what role will critical minerals have to play in our future? And I was wondering, if you would use conventional car batteries, the ones that you have in your combustion engine car right now, how many of those would you need to power an electric car? And I think you can see it already on the screen. You would need 100 of those batteries that would come in at a weight of 1,900 kilograms. So that's obviously way too much for an electric car. We do have access to critical minerals, though. That's the good thing. And we use those for lithium-ion batteries that not only contain lithium, but also cobalt, manganese, etc., and graphite. And that allows us to build batteries that are much lighter and have a high energy density and weigh 400 kilograms only and are much smaller and fit into cars. So that shows you, that should give you a little bit of an example how important critical minerals are. I would like to give you another example, this time about pumps. You can see them on the screen. Pumps that are used, for example, for central heating. Central heatings in houses, more in Germany than in Australia, I guess. But what you can see here is a conventional pump on the left side and a pump with a rare earth magnet in the motor on the right side. The thing is, rare earth magnets allow the motor to be a lot smaller, a lot lighter, and also this motor is a lot more efficient. So in production, that means we have a 50% lower carbon emission, and over the lifetime of 10 years, that means we have a 75% lower carbon dioxide emission, and that's significant. And of course, we don't only have permanent magnets in little heating pumps, but in electric cars, in wind turbines, and many other applications. So I think it's becoming clear that rare earths can have a big influence on the carbon emissions of the future. Thank you, Max, for that. And now I would like to introduce our panelists. First to Amanda. Amanda Lacaze is CEO and Managing Director of Lynas Rare Earths. She was appointed in 2014 and has since then successfully led the company throughout a challenging turnaround. Lynas, company Amanda is working for, is the world's second largest producer of separated rare earths and is the only scale producer outside of China. Lynas operates a rare earth mine in WA in the Mount Weld mine, also a processing facility in Malaysia, and is currently planning another processing facility in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Jürgen.
Then I would like to welcome Andrew Spinks from Ecograph. Andrew is Managing Director of Ecograph and has over 25 years of professional experience in Australia, Asia, and Africa on a range of commodities, including specialty and industrial minerals. Ecograph is a vertically integrated battery anode materials business. So what does that mean? That means Ecograph is working on mining, processing, and also recycling graphite, which is a crucial part of battery anodes. And currently, Ecograph is working on a graphite mine in Tanzania, and also is about to start building a processing facility for graphite in Perth in Western Australia. With the introductions done, I would like to start the discussion with you, Amanda, and you, Andrew, and I would like to ask you, Amanda, the first question. So we have talked about critical minerals a lot now, but and also rare earths. So Amanda, can you please help us understand the difference between critical minerals and rare earths?
Thanks, Jürgen. So if I was being a little bit flippant, I would say that they're both a triumph of branding. Critical minerals, I don't think was a phrase that was even used 5 years ago. And it's been adopted by governments and industry throughout the world. And it's quite fashionable to talk about critical minerals. What does it really mean? Well, it describes a group of materials which are not always similar. In fact, you know, if you think about your periodic table and 75% of them are metals, and it probably captures up a decent segment of that metal segment. But it does describe materials which are required for new technologies. So, for example, the electrification of vehicles or energy, they are essential for modern manufacturing and the sort of facilities and jobs that we need in our economies as we come out of the pandemic. But they also may be critical because they have some supply chain risk associated with them. Rare earths are generally recognised as part of the critical minerals group, but rare earths also is a great brand because actually the 17 elements which are part of the rare earths group are not necessarily that rare in the Earth's crust, but they are rare in concentrations which are economic to mine and to develop. So I would say essential for modern technologies, essential for the sorts of green and decarbonisation technologies that we're looking to develop, and probably encompass some level of supply chain risk.
And handing over to Andrew. Andrew, graphite is just a special modification of the element carbon. So why is it then a critical mineral? Because I think carbon is everywhere. We're talking about reducing carbon on the one hand, but we need carbon on the other hand in the form of graphite. So tell us why is graphite a critical mineral?
No, great. Thanks, Jürgen, and thanks for the kind introduction. Nice to be with both of you as well, Manda. So, yes, no, that's right. I think carbon is ranked as a critical mineral, and I think it's important. They're ranked and determined on three key areas: economic importance, scarcity, and supply risk. And I agree with absolutely with Amanda that the critical minerals, and we also brand carbon as a battery mineral, that they're new age terms for old ways of describing minerals. They were classified as industrial minerals, and graphite and carbon is a critical material for this transition to clean energy. And carbon is quite a unique mineral. It's the only mineral on the periodic table that occurs in two forms. It's diamond and graphite as we know it, and it's a really magnificent mineral. It has enormous industrial uses around conductivity, and also lubrication is one of its other specifications. So it has enormous application, and obviously a lot of people aren't aware. Given that your introduction to lithium-ion batteries, most people think that the lithium-ion batteries is all largely lithium, but largely it's carbon. It's the anode is made up of largely nearly over 90% carbon, 95% carbon, and that comes from natural graphite and synthetic graphite. And it's critical in the form for us is the supply risk. China is the only supplier of this purified spherical graphite into the battery supply chain. So it's recognised as critical through the European Commission's review of the periodic elements, what materials are critical, and the USGS survey. And I guess just one other point is a lot of these surveys like the USGS has a summary of these critical minerals, where the resources are located, and it's important that there's a global supply, diversification of supply chain around these critical minerals.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. So if I understand correctly, that means graphite and also rare earths are on the critical mineral lists of, for example, the EU and the US and also Australia's lists?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Cool. Going to, from a general perspective on critical minerals to critical minerals in Australia. We have a lot of critical minerals in Australia. And if I look at, Amanda, Lynas' Mount Weld mine in Western Australia, which is basically a big hole in the ground, and you find rare earths there. Could you find a mine like that or a resource like that everywhere, or is it really special to find a highly concentrated area with rare earths?
Yeah, okay, so it's not a big hole in the ground, actually, again. Even today, it is what we would regard as a baby mine in Western Australia. It's about 150 metres long, 60 meters, oh no, a bit longer than that long, about 100 meters wide and 60 meters deep. So, you know, if you compare that to some of the big iron ore mines, you would see that it's just a tiny baby little mine. But as with so many other areas, Australia's mineral endowment is generous, and you know, we do have this extraordinary mineralogy in many parts of our country. So Mount Weld itself is a collapsed it's a volcanic pipe. An ancient carbon dating suggests it's up to about 1 billion years old, and it's been weathered over time. We recently did a drill hole down 1 kilometre into using some of that carbon in diamond form, Andrew. So a diamond drill down 1 kilometre into the earth. And of course, our geologists are very excited about this because it tells us what the earth was like 1 billion years ago. The Mount Weld ore body is unique in the world in terms of being this volcanic core. There is only one other carbonatite pipe of this type which is known, and this is the only one which has been significantly explored. And as I said previously, rare earths are not necessarily rare. Cerium, which is one of the light rare earths, is almost as common in the Earth's crust as, say, aluminium, but it is rare for them to be in such concentrations. And the Mount Weld ore body offers the highest grade explored deposit in the world. And so this certainly is, for all of us who work in the minerals industry, our value starts under the ground, and so the quality of our resource is the thing that determines our ability to be successful as we move into further processing options.
Amanda, and despite you saying it's just a tiny hole in the ground, I would very much like to visit Mount Weld one day when I'm back allowed to travel in Western Australia.
We love visitors.
That is good to hear. Thank you very much, Amanda. Andrew, does that also apply to graphite? Is it also found in a couple of places only with high concentrations, or is it rather, found everywhere, to be found everywhere?
Look, that's the challenge with industrial minerals, determining economic viability and saleability. An industrial mineral deposit is, you know, the first step. The big challenge is economic viability and saleability. And you know, we view East Africa as where the huge endowment, the demand is going to be sourced to, you know, provide the demand into Europe and the US. I guess ironically, you know, carbon is seen as, you know, the decarbonising economy. Everybody sees as the demon, but it's hydrocarbon, not elementary carbon like graphite. And ironically, carbon is the major raw material to decarbonise the economy. So it's a conflict of words, but you know, we've elected to look at building our first facility here in West Australia because of the huge amount of other battery-related minerals, and there is no doubt West Australia hosts the world's largest rare earth deposit, but it's also got lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, and we've elected to build the first facility outside of China here, largely because of that endowment. We see West Australia is going to, you know, continue to modernise its manufacturing of critical and battery minerals, and we're going to see further value adding of minerals here in WA.
You know, Andrew, in a previous life, I worked in marketing. I reckon your company slogan should be "Carbon is the key to decarbonisation." I just love it.
I might use that, Amanda. Thank you.
True, that sounds really good. And Andrew, you almost answered my next question already completely. I was going to touch on processing a little bit more, because historically Australia is known as a mining country, that focuses on digging and shipping. So mining ore like iron ore and shipping it to other countries without further processing. But as you just explained, for critical minerals, that might be different, and it makes more sense to process in Australia. And you mentioned already a processing facility you are about to build in Western Australia, and the same applies for Linus. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit more about your plant processing facility in Kalgoorlie?
Sure. It's rather more years ago than I would like to recall, but even when I was back at school, we talked about Australia not just wanting to be the world's quarry and farm. And, you know, over many years, and at one stage I worked in agriculture, and it was, well, why were we sending raw wool overseas? Why didn't we at least, you know, scour the wool here? And similarly, why is it that we're digging up our minerals and sending them off without any value adding done? We are good at value adding in Australia. We are good at learning and developing new technologies. What we are not in Australia is the cheapest. And, you know, over the last 30 years in particular, the West has enthusiastically outsourced its manufacturing mostly to East Asia for one simple reason, and that has been because it has been cheap. I'm quite optimistic that as we move into, you know, the third decade of the 21st century, that we're developing a more elegant understanding of the importance of the way that we make things, as well as what we make and the price at which we make them. And so as we look at things like particularly our approach to ESG, in Australia, we are world leaders in terms of safety culture, safe operations. We are world leaders in understanding ways for us to improve our environmental footprint. And for minerals in particular, we have this helpful thing called a JORC code, which means we can't lie about what is in the ground, which can happen in other areas. So we do need, however, to focus on how can we be more competitive, cost competitive in Australia. Linus currently has a mine and a primary upgrade concentrator here in Australia and our primary processing plant in Malaysia. We are growing our business by creating a new plant in Kalgoorlie. But I can tell you it is a serious challenge for our project team to identify opportunities to balance out the cost, and we still have to be a competitive supplier to balance out the cost with what it costs us to produce the same material in Malaysia. And it's certainly something which I spend a lot of time talking to government about, because government's task really is to provide an infrastructure and an environment in which we in business can then be successful. So things like cost of water, cost of electricity or power, you know, these are things that we really need government to partner strongly with industry to ensure their success. But we're very excited about Kalgoorlie, $500 million on the ground. It's going to be very, you know, it's a terrific project, and we're looking forward to being really substantive members of the Kalgoorlie community.
That sounds fantastic, Amanda. And I hope of a little bit of those 500 million investment goes to German supplier with their fantastic technology. Going to the next topic, which we touched on already, all the challenges, or no, rather all the things that need to be considered when thinking about mining in Australia versus other countries, and why it makes sense to buy from Australia. You know, you mentioned sustainability and other advantages. manufacturers in Europe and the US and Japan, for example, understood that we can in Australia supply minerals, that are made under conditions that are better than in other countries, for example. And happy to for Andrew or Amanda to answer that question.
Oh, look, I think those countries we're having to, one of the great things we're seeing with the federal government is alignment of like-minded countries developing supply chains of these critical battery minerals outside of China. The critical minerals, the value chain, the new age demand of these minerals, the value adding, the manufacturing, the downstream opportunity is much greater than traditional base metal or gold precious metals. So the value adding is a lot more significant, and that's really, I guess, behind the push to see modern manufacturing outside of to occur, to share the value chain. Have the manufacturers recognised? I think they are certainly aware, becoming more aware. We're going to see a lot more demand for critical and battery minerals from the and I think also recycling plays a role here. The Europeans and the US see recycling far more important than Australia does, because we've got a significant endowment. Europe, the US look at recycling as urban mining, and that plays a really important role. So the integration of all this is really what's founded our vertically integrated business. So it's really an interesting topic, and I think we're going to see a lot more interest come out from these manufacturing or manufacturers.
So, Jürgen, I would add to this, international geopolitics are never far from the rare earths world. In 2011, China, which dominates supply and at that stage was the 100% supplier to the market, threatened to stop exports to Japan. And in fact, Lynas was sort of rapidly brought into production as a consequence of that, with funding from the Japanese government. I would say over the last decade, if I classified this, I would say that Japan has a PhD in rare earths, that the US is probably in about second year of their undergraduate degree, and I would suggest with respect that Europe is still at Rare Earths 101. And really understanding the complexities and the risks within the supply chain. I think that there's been quite a lot of work done on that, but converting that to action in the same way that, for example, the Japanese have done, I haven't seen that anywhere else. So the Japanese industry for rare earths consumption and also rare earths processing has doubled since 2013, off the back of confidence in reliable supply, particularly from Lynas. So I would suggest that in Europe that is not yet the case. And I would also say that it is a personal disappointment to me that I am yet to find a customer who is prepared to pay even $1 a kilo more for something which has got proven environmental provenance. And so as I look at in Germany, for example, I think the 400,000 jobs which are involved in the automotive industry, you cannot run an automotive industry without rare earths. You certainly cannot run an automotive industry in the 21st century without rare earths. But that industry at present is yet to evidence a change of behaviour from rewarding purchasing officers for buying the cheapest material. It's funny, I'm building a house at present and putting in a few of my own contributions, like, for example, solar on the roof, but, composting heaps. But even when it came to demolishing the house, I have had to pay a premium for the demolition guys to actually recycle some of the materials there until manufacturers and consumers are prepared to recognize that there is a value associated with this, we will not get a change in behavior and a change in the supply chains. And it is my personal mission to convince those of you in Germany that this is a good thing to do.
Thanks, Amanda. That was a very powerful message, and actually that resonates a lot with what I've experienced in the past years here at the Chamber, because after that initial scare 10 years ago when China threatened to restrict the access to rare earths, there was a little bit of a cry for help, but in the following years, nothing happened. It was back to normal business, and companies just started or continued to buy from the cheapest source, which was China. It is only, and that's the good message, it's only in the last couple of years that I've seen changes in that. I've seen companies, German companies from all different sorts of industries, approaching us and asking for critical minerals that are produced more sustainably. And also looking especially at carbon emissions in the production of those minerals. So let's hope actions follow, and let's hope we see a lot of contracts in the future between Australia and Germany and the US and Europe, of course, as well, and Japan. But I'm really positive on that. We already ran out of our time. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much, Andrew. But there is, as you could feel, there's so much more to discuss, and that's why I'm really happy again that we have you, Amanda, and you, Andrew, on board for our next summit of part 2 of our summit on 24th of March 2022 in real life that time, I hope. And we will also have a couple of the consumers of critical minerals on the panel then as well. BASF is one of them, and there will also be a couple more. Thanks again, Amanda. Thanks again, Andrew. It was a pleasure.
Great to be with you.
Thanks.
Thanks. And I'm going to hand over now back to Christoph, and please allow a couple of seconds for that as he's coming back on stage. Thanks a lot.
Very much, Jürgen. And of course, thank you very much, Amanda and Andrew. I think that was, again, a absolute fantastic panel where we not just talked about the chances and the challenges, but it has from micro to macro everything in it, and even a geostrategic perspective in it. So thank you for that. And again, we're looking forward to continue that conversation next year. Coming to our last and but again, really exciting panel, what we call Powerful Planet. And in this panel, we want to explore energy as such, and with very interesting speakers, and again with a very a wonderful colleague now talking about energy. That's our cluster manager, Florence Lindhaus. Florence, I would now like to hand over. The floor is yours. Now start your fantastic energy panel. Thank you very much.
Can everyone hear me? Can my co-panelists unmute themselves? And yes, great. Awesome, thanks. Cool. Right, good evening. Thank you very much, Christoph. Thank you very much to our sponsors, particularly on this panel where we have SAP and Woodside. And before I greet our speakers, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Florence Lindhaus. I'm the Cluster Manager Energy for the Chamber of Commerce. And I would normally organize the likes of policy engagement or industry exchange or networking events in the cluster. But tonight I'm doing none of that. Tonight I'm taking you on a journey. Let's reflect together on the most decisive moments in the history of humankind. Remember how we learned to master the fire, So we had to spend less time on digestion, and we had much more time to develop tools and weapons and much more. We learned to build boats and navigate the stars and discover new continents. As we heard on a panel before, we invented medicine to keep us alive and healthy. We also invented the steam engine. That brought about wealth and opportunities unimaginable before. What we didn't know was that it came at a price. So today we are facing a heating planet. We've seen bushfires in Australia, but also in Turkey, floods in Germany and Asia, and an unprecedented heat wave in North America and Canada. And in actual fact, insurers have today found that the cost for natural disasters in Australia alone are going to cost us $73 billion per year from the year 2060. We know there's only one way out: decarbonization. It is a mammoth task and a daunting one, but we must do it to preserve our planet for our children and grandchildren. But looking back at the journey we have traveled so far and the innovations we have made in ways for good, and I haven't even mentioned the internet yet, I am hopeful that we can turn global warming around. Please greet with me our speakers for tonight, who are going to tell us how their companies are going to create an emissions-free future. We have Fiona Simon from the Australian Hydrogen Council. We have Andrea Galt from Woodside and Gavin Mooney from SAP. Fiona, would you like to go ahead and tell us what makes you tick at the Hydrogen Council?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and nice to see you, Florence. So the Australian Hydrogen Council, we're the peak body for the emerging clean hydrogen industry in Australia. We know that the global interest and commitment to hydrogen is huge. It's still growing, and it does seem unstoppable. Globally, we've gone from 3 countries with hydrogen strategies in 2019 to 17 governments releasing hydrogen strategies and more than 20 publicly announcing that they're going to. And the funding announcements are big, such as the €9 billion commitment from Germany in 2020, and the recent US commitment to allocate $9.5 billion US directly to hydrogen. So we also know that for Australia, hydrogen shows such promise, and this was recognised by our National Hydrogen Strategy, which was released almost 2 years ago. And one of the measures of success of our strategy is that Australia is one of the top 3 exporters of hydrogen to Asian markets. So we're seeing green shoots appear in Australia and funding announcements, but there's more to be done. And so I'm really happy to speak further about that. But essentially, it's all looking good, but there's more to go. And we at the Hydrogen Council are very keen to get the policy settings in place to have our market get to scale.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Fiona. And we know what a powerhouse you are and how much the Australian hydrogen industry owes you. Andrea, we can't wait to hear what you do at Woodside in particular. What's your role? What does Woodside do?
Thanks, Florence. So Woodside is Australia's leading natural gas producer, and we have a strong history of applying innovative technology and producing bulk energy. So we aim to use this spirit to provide lower carbon fuels like hydrogen and ammonia to our customers all over the world. And my role is to explore how Woodside can partner with companies to supply hydrogen and ammonia into Europe. And with how quickly Europe is chasing low carbon fuels, it's a very exciting time for us in the Europe team.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And Gavin, lucky last.
Thanks, Florence, and it's great to be here today. My name is Gavin Mooney, and I work at SAP, which is a big German multinational that provides enterprise software to companies around the world. So what I mean by enterprise software is it's the software which is actually used to run the company itself. And SAP's mission is to help the world run better and improve people's lives. And as well as providing software such as core finance solutions, SAP also does quite a lot around innovation and sustainability, whether that's climate action, circular economy, or social responsibility. And in my role, I work with utilities across the ANZ region, and I basically help them innovate and run better. And while I used to focus much more on things like billing and customer management systems, these days I'm finding I'm working increasingly on sustainability, decarbonisation, and hydrogen. And you can probably tell I'm from England originally. I've been down under for 13 years now.
Thank you so much, Gavin. Gavin, could you explain to our audience what role hydrogen is playing in decarbonisation?
Yeah, sure. So hydrogen is a gas which, when burnt, releases heat for energy, but also water. So you don't get all those greenhouse gas emissions that you get when you burn a fossil fuel. And if that hydrogen is produced from water using renewable energy to split it into hydrogen and oxygen, then that hydrogen is a zero emissions fuel. And this can be really useful in decarbonising the so-called hard to abate sectors. So we probably need to just unpack that a little bit. If you look at the sectors that we need to decarbonise, some of them are much easier to decarbonise than others. So we could take electricity, for example. To decarbonise that, what we need to do is transition from burning fossil fuels, such as coal or gas, to sourcing electricity from renewable energy, so wind, solar, hydro, and so on. So that's pretty straightforward, and that is already happening around the world and in Australia as well. Take the car in your garage, or if we transition from driving cars which burn petrol and diesel to electric vehicles, then we can decarbonise that sector as well. And that's something which, as you may know, has been slow to kick off in Australia, but there seems to be a little bit of momentum gathering now. And also home heating. So we could use electric heat pumps to heat our homes instead of burning gas, and we can reduce emissions that way. So electricity, transport, heating, these are all sectors which are fairly straightforward to decarbonise. We basically electrify them and we transition to renewable energy. We just need to get on with that now. But there are other sectors too. Some of the ones we don't think about as often: agriculture, industrial processes, and it's not so straightforward in these cases. There's not really a direct path to electrification. And these are the ones that we call hard to abate. And this is where hydrogen can possibly help us out. So if I just dig into that a little bit, the way I see it, there are two broad categories of hard to abate sector. You've got the ones where we could electrify, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to. It's not really practical. And you've got the ones where the emissions are actually coming from a chemical process. So to reduce those emissions, we need to change the process. We can't just hit it with electricity. So taking an example from each, for the first category, shipping would be an example. So I could build an electric ship. I could power it with batteries, and that is happening today, especially for ships which stay closer to the coast. But for transoceanic container ships which travel thousands of miles, you would end up needing so many batteries, it's just not really practical. So what we can do there is we could power the ship with ammonia, which is a derivative of hydrogen. So if we get this hydrogen emissions-free fuel and we use it to create ammonia, then we can decarbonise our ship. And this is something we're starting to see a little bit of progress towards now. And an example from the second category would be steel manufacturing. So one of the steps in making steel is to use coking coal as what we call a reducing agent. So it strips the oxygen off iron ore and leaves you with iron. But as part of that process, the coking coal releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, something that Fortescue and Twiggy Forrest have been pushing quite hard recently, which our audience may have seen in the news, is that we can make green steel by using hydrogen for that reducing agent. So hydrogen performs the role that the coking coal is performing. It converts the iron ore to iron and reduces all those emissions. And there's other uses for hydrogen too, which we might get into during this panel, potentially long-haul aviation, potentially seasonal energy storage, and so on. But I'll leave it at that for now.
That was amazing, Gavin. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that gave the audience a really good overview on hydrogen. Fiona, if hydrogen is the silver bullet of decarbonization, it shouldn't be facing any obstacles, or does it?
It unfortunately does. And really that's just because it doesn't exist yet in its market form. So we're seeing, we are seeing these green shoots. We've got funding announcements. I mentioned some of the international ones. We have some here as well. We've got 74 announced projects right now in Australia. We've got 10 megawatt electrolyzers scheduled to come online in 2023. There's a lot of activity, which is fantastic, but the scale that is required ultimately is actually pretty massive. And the hydrogen industry, and it's in its clean form. So, hydrogen does exist as an industry right now, but obviously we're talking about that clean and green future version that is doing all those wonderful things that Gavin was referring to, and others. That is pre-commercial. So the cost to make hydrogen is currently well above where it would need to be to compete with incumbent fossil fuels, and that's across various applications. And in some applications, it is much less able to compete. But we also don't have yet the supply chains, the infrastructure, or the vehicles, or the vessels. But similarly, we once didn't have that for petrol. We once didn't have that for natural gas. But in the here and now, we do have existing infrastructure for our hydrocarbons, and we have markets, and as a result, it's cheap, and it's hard to compete with that if you're coming in as a new. Well, it's not entirely a new molecule, but if you're kind of come in with a new market in this kind of molecule, it's a bit of a challenge. So now Australia's in a really good position because we've got lots of land, we've got the solar, the wind. And we're being looked to by many in the world as being a potential major producer of hydrogen because of those natural resources, as well as the really good trading relationships that we have. And clearly, it's also at the heart of there's the accord between Germany and Australia. However, we are in a competitive environment. There are other countries with land and sun and wind to make renewable energy, and the race is on. So other countries are seeing also how they can grasp the opportunity to be exporters of hydrogen and its derivatives like ammonia. So while we are well regarded and the preferred trading partner for many, we could still miss the boat, so to speak. So hydrogen as this industry globally, it will happen. I think we're yet to see how big it could be, but if we look at Australia's role in that, we could miss out if we don't act. So in Australia, we don't yet have net zero commitments or carbon pricing to encourage investment in clean and green hydrogen. We don't have milestones or targets, at least not ones that are sort of associated with dates, with volumes and the like, for hydrogen, let alone net zero. And so we also then don't yet have a true sense of the scale of what's required across key elements like funding and land and regional workforces. And our challenge is also the fragmented government structure that we have across the states and the territories, which does make national coordination and a Team Australia bid for trade relationships, I think, just that bit more challenging. No, none of this is impossible, absolutely. We can absolutely manage this, and the Australian government and others are doing that. But we've been arguing that something, about what the next steps are. It's like, let's build on the national hydrogen strategy. Let's build on low emissions technology work. Let's build on those warm and trusted, international relationships and the discussions that are being had. So we released a white paper last week, the Australian Hydrogen Council, and the paper sets out recommendations for actions to help Australia reach net zero emissions with the assistance of the hydrogen industry. And for those who are interested, that document's available from the publications page of our public website. And to give a really brief overview, we are saying that the planning piece is vital, and we've been saying that for a while. So we say that we really do need national planning for coordinated effort on major infrastructure decisions, and they are major decisions that need to be made. It's the billions of dollars on gas, on a new gas pipeline versus billions of dollars in electricity transmission infrastructure, for even just one major project. It's understanding just the sheer amount of renewable electricity that'll be required to, before you even get to hydrogen, to decarbonise the economy, and are we double counting in ways that is going to actually limit us achieving our ambitions if we don't realise that now. So we are basically arguing also then, on top of the planning, we need funding to match those hydrogen ambitions, and to really prioritise those harder to abate sectors of the economy, so that they can also get us to scale. So we're arguing for a net zero fund to be established with an initial allocation of $10 billion Australian, and then a top up of $1 billion a year to 2030. And within that funding allocation, we're also arguing for a hydrogen readiness program of at least $1 billion for industrial processes, like for the production of iron and steel, ammonia, methanol and alumina. And we're also advocating for heavy transport vehicle trials with refueling stations included. And we are absolutely suggesting these sectors because they're applications that are harder to abate. They're more likely to require clean hydrogen to decarbonise and also to get to scale. And they can also have an opportunity to open the market to other applications through knowledge and technology sharing, geographic proximity, and ideally cost reductions overall. I do just want to say that the problem of not having a concrete plan or serious dollars to get to scale on hydrogen isn't unique to Australia. Globally, the ambitions for hydrogen and for net zero have been really great to see, but there are still missing evolutionary steps. The International Energy Agency said something similar in a paper it released on Monday, where it essentially noted that reaching net zero requires much more than what has been seen to date. And if I just quote from them, they're saying countries that adopted hydrogen strategies have committed at least $37 billion US. The private sector has announced an additional investment of $300 billion US. But putting the hydrogen sector on track for net zero emissions by 2050 requires $1,200 billion US of investment in low carbon hydrogen supply and use through to 2030. And they go on to say a lot of other things, including we're not seeing the demand policies getting up as fast. We're not seeing that adoption happening as quickly as we need it to. So the bad news is it's not just Australia that has more to do, but the good news is that with reports like this from the IEA, we can at least see that gap to be filled, because if you know, it doesn't exist if you haven't measured it. And also we're seeing financial markets account for climate risks. We're seeing some governments really take the lead, and I actually hold the German government up as a strong example there. And I'm really hoping there's a cascading political effect. Certainly for Australia, I hope that as we approach COP26 and with the federal election looming, we might see a better prospect of the Australian government committing to net zero. And we're certainly keen to work with the government on a plan to get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That was absolutely fantastic. And there was so much to say about what you just said, but I can recommend to the audience to read that report. And in actual fact, if beautiful back office wouldn't mind actually posting it, the latest white paper, it is a great read. May I even say it's entertaining, and it definitely puts you at the forefront of everything that you need to know about hydrogen. It's really fantastic, very worthwhile reading and great information. Now, Andrea, after all we heard about the homework that Australia has to do, how would you compare this to what the hydrogen situation is like on the other side of the planet?
Yeah, so decarbonization has been touted as obviously something that's vitally critical and something that everyone needs to get on board. Hydrogen has the claim of being the silver bullet. And so it's really interesting to see that everyone seems to be having their hydrogen strategies and their ammonia strategies. And it definitely is one of those solutions. And I think it's super important, especially for those areas that are harder to decarbonize, as Gavin and Fiona mentioned. There's uptake in a lot of these sectors. In addition to the ones they mentioned, there's also heavy long-range transport, so heavy-duty trucks, coaches, trains, ferries, and buses. There's also additional power sources like remote generators and seasonal energy storage. We're seeing, though, across the globe that there's uptake in a lot of different sectors. So things that wouldn't necessarily be your first guess for hydrogen, and we're seeing that hydrogen can step in to fill the gap. So, for example, with current battery technology, electric buses only have a current range of about 250 kilometers, whereas hydrogen allows for an extension of that range and an improvement in performance where batteries would otherwise struggle, both because of the battery weight decreasing the payload, but also because of the recharge times. And so in the US, we're seeing the likes of Amazon and Walmart, they've moved to hydrogen forklifts in their warehouses, as hydrogen vehicles just require a refill instead of a battery swap out. Now, not only has this led to improvement in productivity, but also a reduction in back-related injuries due to lifting heavy batteries. So an unintended consequence that has a real benefit. Plus, you don't have the hazardous waste when the battery reaches its end of life. And in Europe, we've seen that they're a little bit more advanced, and hydrogen endeavors are being taken up in almost all the sectors. And so it's really good for Australia to look at Europe in particular and learn from these sectors where hydrogen has been that silver bullet in uptake, and also where it's turned out not to be. And then we can learn from those lessons as well. So we're seeing various regions have different uptake. In Japan, we're seeing a big push for co-firing hydrogen as ammonia for use in their decarbonizing their coal-fired power generation plants. Whereas in Korea, we've seen a large uptake in the hydrogen passenger vehicles, and hydrogen buses are gaining a lot more traction as well. I think for Australia, we'll definitely see an uptake in a few of these areas, but really where Australia can thrive is hydrogen for export, just like what we've seen with the LNG industry. So Australia supplies bulk energy fuel as LNG to many countries, and we can do the same for hydrogen as well. And in addition to that, we can use our hydrogen expertise and produce in other regions across the world, like Europe, for example. So while hydrogen may not be the silver bullet that everyone is claiming it is, it's definitely a bullet that we can use in our arsenal in the energy transition, and we're seeing it all over the globe. So my thought is hydrogen is a bullet that's here to stay.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Andrea. And it's a very interesting thought that I hadn't really entertained before you said it, that indeed, when you power something with a battery, then you have a battery and you need to dispose of it at some stage. That's a very interesting thought, other than just the handling and the back pain that comes with it. Right, thanks for that. Now, last question, if you just could quickly, in 1 or 2 sentences, say what would be on your wish list for Santa Claus for our global energy situation? Gavin, would you like to go first?
Sure. Fusion, without a doubt, because if we can get that to work, then all these discussions are pretty much meaningless. Solves all our problems. Even if it's 50 years away. I mean, it's always been 50 years away or 10 years away, hasn't it? I heard a joke recently that fusion obeys the law of conservation of difficulty. So when you solve one problem, another problem emerges of equal magnitude. So it is a little bit like that, but this is a Santa Claus wish list. So yeah, that's top of my list.
Santa Claus can sort it, I'm sure. Thanks for that, Gavin. Fiona, what would be yours?
I'll stick with the hydrogen part of it and just say a global market in hydrogen, a way for investors to find a way to invest. So, and whatever it takes to get there. So carbon price or targeted carbon policies, all the different ways that we can get a market up. I don't mind what they are.
Andrea.
So on my wish list would be industry partnering with government with incentives so that we can move faster, so that we can expedite this exciting adventure we're on. I think government organizations that support industry, like the H2 Global scheme that we've seen in Germany, are absolutely crucial to help address the economic gaps that we're currently experiencing. And it's not just about the money, it's also about approvals, standards, safety, public education, tax incentives, policies. It's a lot more than just handing over a grant. While that is very important, there's so much more that we could be doing together. And we really welcome the approach that the German government is taking and trying new ways to support the energy transition. It's clever and it's innovative. And we look forward to working with the Australian government to help expedite the hydrogen economy here while learning from the successful programs of other jurisdictions.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of you, each of you a great expert in their field, for your time tonight. And I'm very grateful that you were here to help me with this panel. I hope that everyone got a bit of a better idea of what an emissions-free future might look like and hydrogen's role in it, even though we only just did scratch the surface. And I'm looking forward to March, where we will be able to answer questions as well. When we look back at our cavemen at the start of the panel, it seems that managing the fire may have been one of the biggest advancements in humankind. Decarbonization might be the next. in March, we will discuss everything in more detail, highlight some key sectors, and discuss some more with the public as well, or with the audience as well. We are working on nothing less, after all, than decarbonizing and therefore preserving the planet. It is going to be an exciting journey, that's for sure. And we're going to be using our brain and technology and get everyone involved. But we have come a long way, so I trust we can do it. See you in March. Over back to Christoph.
Thank you very much, Florence. Thank you very much, Andrea, Fiona, and Gavin. I think that was a lot more than just scratching the surface. Thanks for all this, again, very valuable insights, and for exploring all the opportunities we see in making Australia a clean energy superpower, in decarbonizing our industry, Europe, Germany, and here in Australia. And now I have to say, it is a very special moment, and you might have already guessed it, there is something really exciting to announce. Everyone active in the hydrogen field knows how dynamic the bilateral collaboration is, with exciting announcements nearly every single day, and we just discussed it. This is why we, as the German-Australian Chamber, founded the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance last November, to establish a forum for business-to-business hydrogen collaboration between both our countries. In this, we are endorsed by both governments from Germany and Australia, and supported by you, dear Fiona, and the Australian Hydrogen Council, as well as the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, Australia and the Pacific. The Alliance is an important platform for exchange between Australian and German stakeholders, informing and driving forward activities, and most importantly, coordinating actions with a bilateral background. So today, I'm very proud to announce a new milestone development in the bilateral hydrogen collaboration. And of course, for us, the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance. As inaugural presenting partner of the Alliance, we welcome Deutsche Bank. This engagement by Deutsche Bank is important, also in regards to the bigger picture of the global energy landscape, and we just heard all about it. We are in a pivotal time of restructuring how the world sources its energy for a sustainable and prosperous future. And green hydrogen will play a major role on the global stage, including between Australia and Germany. We founded the Alliance to maximize the unparalleled potential of German hydrogen technology know-how and Australia's wealth of renewables and resources to position both countries as catalysts for a net zero future. This development is supported by quite concrete decisions. Germany has a legislated aim to reach net zero emissions by 2045. And Australia has a well-studied potential to create a significant green hydrogen export industry. Both countries have executed formal energy cooperation agreements, including the Australia-Germany Hydrogen Accord, announced by both governments in June, that included support for bilateral hydrogen business. We heard about it. With Deutsche Bank as a leading international bank for ESG solutions in Australia, I could not have wished for a better presenting partner than you at Deutsche Bank. So now I'd like to introduce Glenn Morgan, Chief Executive Officer of Deutsche Bank in Australia. Glenn, maybe you can put on your camera. Glenn, you have more than 25 years experience in the financial services sector. Prior to your current role as CEO, you were head of equities for Australia with responsibility for equity sales and trading, flow derivatives, and prime broking business. And Glenn, I also learned that everything around sustainability is very close to your heart. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity to accelerate growth in all industries. Can I now please ask Glenn to speak to us? Thank you very much. I hope we can see you now. Let me also include you, dear Peter Connor, and maybe we can see you in the call. and in our virtual conference hall. Yeah, sorry, please excuse me all. We just hear that Glenn is online and that he will actually join in every second. So it's all to increase the excitement. Glenn, I think it's just, you're nearly there, if I understand it correctly. So thanks for joining in a minute, hopefully. Looking at my helpers here in our little studio. Maybe we can ask Peter, head of corporate banking. No. Ladies and gentlemen, we do experience, as it is sometimes when you have pioneer works, we do experience a bit of a technical issue here. Please excuse us for that. But that gives me the great opportunity to actually welcome, to announce another big highlight of the chamber. As I said, it's absolutely rich of highlights. It is my absolute pleasure to announce now our new German-Australian Chamber Honorary President, you, dear Professor Bronwyn Fox. You are an outstanding and inspirational leader with deep understanding and links with Germany, as well as in industry and research in Australia. Bronwyn, maybe you can turn on your camera. I hope you will be able to join us. Bronwyn, so whilst I'm very happy to introduce you, maybe you can find your way online. You just commenced your appointment as Chief Scientist at CSIRO, Australia's National Science Agency. You joined from Swinburne University of Technology, where you've been Deputy Vice Chancellor with a focus on research and enterprise. Throughout your distinguished career, you have worked interdisciplinary and focused on Australia's growth sectors. You are a materials and engineering scientist by heart, and you were the founding director of Swinburne's Manufacturing Futures Research Institute, with the mission to support the transition of Australia's manufacturing sector to Industry 4.0. And now I have the great opportunity, and please excuse me that we have to handle and to improvise a bit now, because I do see Peter now in the line, which is from Deutsche Bank. So I have to please ask our dearest honorary president for your patience. It is just that we have all things at the same time, so much interesting developments. And with this, I'm very, very happy to have you, Peter, now in the call. Peter, we had the delightful opportunity to work together with you on developing this partnership. So thanks again that we can bring Deutsche Bank and the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance together to open this new chapter. So with that, thanks again, everyone, for your patience for this little technical issue, but I'm very happy that we have you, Peter, now to talk to us from Deutsche Bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
We can hear you well. Thank you. And sorry, Bronwyn, thanks. We see you in a minute. Thank you.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, and let me apologize on behalf of Glenn. I think I can see him online now, so we may switch to him for his comments as well. But Christoph, thank you very much, and I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to His Excellency, Dr. Thomas Fischer. You know, as a European organization, Deutsche Bank have played a really important role in connecting the markets around the world. And really to highlight this, we are celebrating our 150th year with a presence in APAC, as incredible as it seems. So, that milestone for us will be next year. And, Deutsche continues to focus on the global strategy. Within that, clearly, as the world pivots, sustainability is now equally placed as a core of that global strategy. And today we're really excited to be joining the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance as an inaugural presenting partner. I run the corporate banking division here in Australia, and really what we do as an organization is connect basically the multinational corporates that the bank services, particularly in Europe, to the rest of the world, right? And our focus is really how do we partner with those companies out of our heartland and support their business wherever it may be. When we look at hydrogen and we look at the development of hydrogen and we recognize the importance of decarbonization, I think we have a unique role to play in terms of sitting alongside the industry as it develops, working with government partners, working with our clients, and recognizing that our clients will fit into many parts of the value chain, whether they're the technology providers, whether they are the organizations financing the projects, or whether our clients are ultimately off-taking the hydrogen. It's a part that the bank can sit behind that entire value chain. Of course, this is a German-Australian alliance, so it was a very natural fit for us as a bank. Looking at the co-sponsors, understanding exactly what the chamber does, we saw a lot of benefits for the bank, and we are very, very pleased to join the alliance and play our part as it develops. If you look at the corporate bank, Stefan Hoops is our global head of the corporate bank, and he's committed to a cumulative total of 30 billion of sustainable finance by the end of 2023. Obviously, this initiative sits right in the heart of that strategy, and we're really looking forward to playing a part supporting our clients through that sustainability journey. Probably a few other points of interest to this group and how important ESG is to us as a bank. We've established an ESG Center of Excellence in Singapore, working with the MAS. And alongside that, we have a very close relationship with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation in Australia. Stephen Starkler, who is our Vice Chairman for Deutsche Bank Australia, is also the chairman of that organization. And therefore, I think the bank is extremely well placed to connect the pieces together. Hydrogen's obviously a global industry for us. Deutsche Bank's global footprint will be very supportive of that. And this alliance will play an important platform for us to participate with all the stakeholders. So I'd like to thank the German-Australia Chamber of Industry and Commerce for the outstanding work they've done in this alliance. I've had a lot of fun working with the team, Christoph, Michael, and Florence, as we've put this together. And we're very excited where this will go. And we're looking forward to Deutsche Bank playing a part throughout its global network here in Australia, but also back in the home base. So back to you, Christoph. Sorry, it was a promptu. No, I wasn't the speaker. So
Peter, you absolutely did fantastic, and I cannot stress enough how optimistic we can look in the future with you at our side, and that we really are looking forward to exploring all the opportunities and to invite companies in Germany and in Australia to explore and to build the hydrogen economy between both countries. So thanks again. And also best regards to Glenn. Hopefully we can all meet soon in person to then get to know each other and talk about it. And at the latest, of course, course, in March. Having said all that, once again, dearest Bronwyn, please excuse the little technical hiccup. Again, I would like to say it is an absolute pleasure to have you as our new honorary president of the German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce. It's fantastic to see you. You are an outstanding leader, as I already said. And without big further ado, and I know that you just had I think it's your third day in your new role at CSIRO as chief scientist. So we're particularly pleased that you really find the time now to join us, to say a few words of welcome to us. And we look forward to a wonderful time together with you, and hopefully, as mentioned again, soon in person. But with this, dear President, over to you. The virtual floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christoph. And my warmest congratulations to you, the Chamber, and the entire team on organising such a thought-provoking and inspiring event today. It's been truly terrific. Well done. The German-Australian Chamber of Industry and Commerce has a really proud history with offices in Sydney and Melbourne that were established in 1977. The Chamber is so highly respected for its work in bridging the physical divide between Germany and Australia for businesses from both sides, and in close collaboration with both governments. The role of the Honorary President is to support this connection and to add a bit of a personal touch to the work of the Chamber. For me personally, the relationship between Australia and Germany has resulted in a rich collaboration for more than 15 years, and this has been supported through the work of the Chamber, Austrade, and both embassies. I've personally had really wonderful collaborations with industry, including Siemens and Mercedes, with universities, including Stuttgart and Bayreuth, and with key strategic initiatives in Germany, including Arena 2036, the Industry 4.0 Test Lab Network, and the Industry 4.0 platform. In my experience, Australia has benefited enormously from access to Germany's deep expertise and world-leading developments in the digitalisation of manufacturing, and our German partners have enjoyed Australia's creativity and innovation and access to our world-class research institutions. Another example of a future bilateral opportunity is hydrogen, and we've just heard some incredible developments there, including the insightful Powerful Planet panel, and as demonstrated by that really amazing announcement with the Deutsche Bank and their involvement in the German-Australian Hydrogen Alliance. I've had the great pleasure of connecting Australia and Germany in hydrogen in my former role. And in February, we launched the Victorian Government-supported Hydrogen Hub, which is a partnership between Swinburne University of Technology, the Hydrogen Mission at the CSIRO, and Arena 2036 at the University of Stuttgart. I plan to continue to foster innovation and collaboration, including with Germany, in my new role as Chief Scientist at Australia's National Science Agency, the CSIRO, and this aligns perfectly with my role as Honorary President of the German-Australian Chamber. I'm delighted to support the Chamber's work and to collaborate with the board, Christoph and his team, and support them as they execute their really exciting new strategy. The Chamber members and the wider members of the German-Australian business community, there are really exciting times ahead, as we've heard many times throughout today's summit. I'm also extremely honoured and proud to follow in the footsteps of my predecessors, including Lucy Turnbull AO, and most recently, Andrew Mackenzie FRS. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you on these many, many bilateral opportunities, including the energy transition. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Ich freue mich auf die Zusammenarbeit mit Ihnen. I really hope to see you in person in the near future, and I'm looking forward to serving the Chamber.
Thank you so very much, dearest Bronwyn. And I'm absolutely sure that everyone, not just in my team, in the board, but also all our delegates today join me in saying that we couldn't wish for a better president for the Chamber. So thank you so much, not just for the kind words, but for taking this offer and for leading the chapter into a new future. And with this, I would like to thank everyone for your attention today. We had, I believe, a really, really appetizing warm-up and part one of our Growth Summit this year. We started with the healthy humans. We explored the beauty of beautiful intelligence. We explored precious Earth, and we saw a powerful planet and a good future. And above all that, if I'd like to come back to my little start with the wheat, I also would like to strengthen that wheat is probably one of the most resilient plants as well. And guess what? When they found in the 20th century, Pompeii found little wheat corns, and actually half of them were able, if after it was planted, to grow again. So I would like to close and to say that next year we need a bit of patience, but hopefully next year we can see all of you together here in Sydney on the 24th of March. Then we will go into even more depth in the discussion. We will can congratulate all of us that we made it through. We can have the rapid growth in all those sectors again, and we want to celebrate the German-Australian business results then, and all the opportunities that lie ahead of us. So once again, a big thank you to everyone for joining today. Now we would like to open our network platform for a little bit longer, so you all have some time to talk, to chat, to see each other. I know it's online, sorry. And also just got an email here from our former Vice President, Ron Köhler. Thanks also for your email. I know it is hopefully the last online event and that we can all meet again face to face. Thank you very much. Back to network and have a great evening or morning in Germany. Thank you.